I was in my kitchen, watching how the lemon glaze swirled under my spatula. The aroma of sugar and citrus filled the air, sticking like memories that don't fade. I tried, but I couldn't shake it off. It was Jimena's favorite since she was a girl with braids and scraped knees, running barefoot through the backyard. She called it sun cake. She made it every year in illnesses, holidays, even the year that German died. But this one felt different. I spent the morning humming, setting the table with their favorite daisies, cleaning the cutlery twice. I even ironed the napkins. A part of me, that naive part, thought I could soften something today, her. At noon, the main door creaked open. Jimena entered first, with the coat over her arm, followed by her husband, Ismael, and her 2 children. They barely looked at me when they came in. "Surprise," I said, smiling. "I did something special." Jimena stopped at the threshold, her face indecipherable. She looked around the room as if she didn't recognize it. Or maybe she just didn't care. "What is all this?" she asked. I pointed at the lemon cake. "Your favorite. I thought we could have lunch like before." She crossed her arms. "Mom, don't you understand? I don't need a cake or lunch. The best gift you could give me is that you disappear from my life." I didn't speak. I couldn't. The words stuck in my chest, sharp and sudden. "I'm fed up with you being on top of me, pushing yourself in." Ismael just looked at the ground. The children went to the living room without saying anything. They left before I could answer. The door closed tightly behind them. I sat at the table that I had prepared with so much care and looked at the untouched cake. The scent of lemons still lingered, but it no longer smelled like sunshine. It smelled like something I needed to forget. I wrapped the cake in foil and kept it in the refrigerator. Then I turned off the lights one by one until only the lamp in the hallway remained, and I was left with silence and words that I couldn't undo. That night, I sat alone at the dining room table with the lemon cake still in the refrigerator, wrapped in its aluminum, intact and unnecessary. The room had a stillness that wasn't peace, just absence. The centerpiece with daisies began to fade. A petal fell as I looked at the chair Jimena had briefly occupied. Her words echoed in my head again and again, as if repeating them would make sense. "Disappear from my life. How do you raise someone with your own hands, take her by the hand in every illness and heartbreak, and then they say you're no longer wanted? Without warning, no preparation, just a cold and definitive rejection." I looked around the house and I didn't see anything of mine. The curtains were no longer mine. The living room had been repainted in a dull gray that Jimena insisted was more modern. My favorite chair for reading was in the garage, put away to make room for her sectional sofa. Even my bedroom, my refuge, was no longer mine. Now I slept in the guest room, a space that was never meant to stay. Everything happened slowly. First the requests, then the assumptions. Only until we save enough. It's temporary. But temporary turned into years, and I was becoming smaller without realizing it, centimeter by centimeter, decision by decision. I believed that love was sacrifice, that letting go was the language of endearment. But sitting at that table, with the only sound the faint hum of the refrigerator, I began to wonder if the only thing I taught them was how easy it was to make myself disappear. I stood up and walked toward the guest room with heavy steps, but with something inside me that was beginning to move for the first time in a long time. I didn't cry that night. No, not out loud, at least. I sat at the edge of the guest bed and looked at the worn photo of German on the nightstand. His eyes always seemed kind, even in stillness. I used to tell Jimena that she had his smile when she still let me tell her. I ran my finger along the edge of the frame and let my mind travel back in time after he died. Jimena was only 7 years old. I remember how she clung to my leg at the funeral, how her little hand trembled in mine. I didn't have the luxury of collapsing. The grief had to wait. It was necessary to pay the rent, and a girl still needed breakfast and clean socks. I took night shifts at the hospital cafeteria, doing stunts when I could. During the day, I sewed Halloween costumes. One year, a complete set of butterfly wings with handmade fabric, trapping light like stained glass. I remember Jimena spinning in the living room, the fabric catching the light. I had barely slept that week. Art school offered me a scholarship late that same fall. I remember holding the acceptance letter in one hand and the dentist's bill in the other. It wasn't really a decision. Dreams were a luxury I couldn't afford. I didn't resent it. I really didn't. I loved with a fierceness that felt sacred. Each sacrifice was an offering, a way to keep her safe, to give her more, to protect her from feeling the absence of the man she would barely remember. I told myself for years that it would all be worth it, that one day she would understand, that my silent surrender would be her compass. But now, at 62, I wondered if what I taught her was not love, but convenience. I leaned back against the headboard and closed my eyes. The house creaked softly as it settled, just like my body with pains in places I used to ignore. They were all sleeping under my roof, and yet I had never felt stranger in my own life. In the morning, I would make coffee, fold the clothes, but that night, I finally allowed myself to wonder if none of this was seen, what I had been building my whole life. 3 days passed without a word from Jimena. No apologies, not even a forced good morning, just the sound of doors opening and closing, coffee that was prepared and poured without offering me a second cup. The children barely raised their eyes from their screens. Ismail gave me a nod once, but it was mechanical, more habit than kindness. I kept folding their clothes, I kept cleaning the countertops, I even refilled the liquid soap in the bathroom when I saw it was low, but something in me had silenced. I had stopped searching. On Thursday afternoon, I entered the hallway just when Jimena was in the kitchen with the phone glued to her ear. She didn't see me. Or maybe she did and didn't care. She should just hand us the house, she said. She's too big to handle now. The truth would be easier if we didn't have to tiptoe around her all the time. I stayed frozen behind the door, her voice cutting something raw inside me. There was a pause. Then she laughed, low and cruelly. No, she's not going to fight. She never does. I stepped back before hearing more. My hands were cold, not angry, empty, as if every part of me had been skinned, and the center was no more than air. That night, I sat at the dining room table with a blank page in front of me. The kitchen light buzzed gently. I took my pen and let the words come out without permission, unedited. I have been invisible, but no longer. I didn't know what that would mean yet. Not exactly, but writing it felt like reaching a thread I dropped years ago. I closed the notebook and put it carefully on the table. Then I turned off the light and went asleep with the silent certainty that something had changed. Not in them, in me. The next morning, I took the bus to the center of San Miguel de Allende. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I didn't leave a note. They'd think I was at the market or strolling through the main garden. I grabbed my old leather folder, full of documents that hadn't been seen in years, bank statements, the deed of the house, the will that German and I made when Jimena was 10. The law office was on the second floor of a worn brick building. A plaque on the door said, Renata C. Vargas, lawyer. She was about 50 years old, with short, gray hair and kind but firm eyes. She offered me tea. I declined. I want to freeze access to all shared accounts, I said in a firm voice. Update my will and recover total authority over the property. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she nodded. You're not being cruel, she said gently. You're being clear. I didn't cry. I didn't apologize. We spent the next hour reviewing papers, adding names, removing others. Renata explained each form, giving me space for questions, but I didn't have any. Every step felt right, not easy, but right. When I left, the wind felt different on my skin, sharper maybe, or maybe I just noticed it for the first time in years. On the way home, I stopped at a bakery on the main street and bought a small croissant, just one. I ate it in the main garden, near the bus stop, surrounded by strangers and leaves that were falling late. It wasn't a celebration. Not exactly, but something in me had changed, and this time I wouldn't tuck it away in a corner. Jimena found out in 2 days. I had barely saved the lawyer's receipt in my drawer when she came into the kitchen furiously, with the phone squeezed like a weapon. What did you do? She shouted, her eyes blazing with fury. The accounts? Why can't I access savings? Why is everything blocked? I didn't raise my voice, just looked at her and said, because they're mine. She blinked as if she didn't understand the words, as if I had spoken in a language she never bothered to learn. Are you crazy? She hissed. Do you want the kids and me to end up on the street? I folded the napkin I was holding. Something will occur to you, I said. She didn't answer. She just walked out, slamming the pantry door as she passed. That afternoon, she made calls. First to her cousin in Querétaro, then to someone from the church we hadn't attended in years. I heard fragments. She's changed. After all we've done, she throws us out with nothing. Her voice broke for effect, softening at the right moments. The next morning, I opened my email and found messages I didn't ask for. One said, "You're going to die alone." Another, "It's no wonder she doesn't want to know anything about you." Most were uninformed. I read them once and didn't reply. Even Ismail, who had always been in the background as an afterthought, stopped looking me in the eyes. He passed by me without saying a word, his steps stronger than necessary. The house felt colder, though the thermostat hadn't changed. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. Instead, I opened the garage and dragged my old armchair back into the living room. I took down the gray blinds that Jimena had put up and hung the flowery curtains I sewed the year she went to university. I bought a bouquet of daisies and placed them in the center of the table, not because they were her favorite, but because I realized I liked them too. In the silence that followed, I sat in the armchair, which was finally mine again, and let the stillness settle in like a new form of peace. I waited until the dishes were washed and the children were upstairs. The kitchen was still warm from dinner, with the aroma of garlic and tomato floating in the air. Jimena was on the couch, scrolling on her phone with one leg tucked under her. "I need to talk to you," I said. She didn't look up. I sat in front of her and placed the printed bank statements on the coffee table between us. There were withdrawals I didn't make. Thousands of pesos missing. Jimena looked at the papers and returned to her screen. We needed it. Things for the children's school, car repairs. You wouldn't understand. You didn't ask, I said. Her thumb stopped mid-motion. Why are you so dramatic? You have more than enough. Don't you think it's time you thought about us? I looked at her, really looked at her. She was no longer the 12-year-old asking for ballet slippers. She was a grown woman asking for more than I had left to give. I've spent my whole life thinking about you, I said quietly, but I won't let you take it away in silence anymore. Jimena rolled her eyes. You're old, Mom. You don't need all this. It's just space and money. Why do you keep holding on? I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. Then you'll have to build your life without me, I said. For a moment, she didn't speak. The room seemed to tense around us. I stood up and gathered the papers. You can stay until the end of the month, I added. But then I need my house back. Jimena didn't follow me when I left the room, and for the first time, I didn't look back to see if she would. The papers were delivered the following week. Jimena tore them in half and threw them at my feet. This is my house too, she shouted. Have you lost your mind? No, I said calmly, though my hands were trembling. I found it. Ismail said nothing. He stood behind her with his arms crossed, eyes dull. I had gotten too used to being here without income, without real responsibility. I once asked him to take out the trash, and he said, "That's your job, isn't it?" Now he just shook his head and muttered, "You're tearing this family apart." I almost laughed. I think that part was done long before any paper was signed. In the following days, Jimena called out to whoever would listen, cousins I hadn't spoken to in years, old friends from church, neighbors. The phone kept ringing with voices wondering how I could be so cruel. They repeated her words, "After all she's done for you, you took her in. You're going to die alone, Amalia." Whispers began on the sidewalk, in the market, with passion and judgment in equal parts. But one afternoon, I found an envelope on my porch with no return address. Inside was a folded letter from Mrs. Torres, who lived 2 houses away. Amalia, I have lived across from you for 20 years. I saw how much you carried, how much they overlooked. I never said anything, but I want you to know I see you. I've always seen you. I held that letter as if it were something fragile and sacred. Then I folded it carefully and tucked it into my notebook. That night, I stood at the window, watching how the porch lights came on across the street. For the first time in a long time, I knew I wasn't as alone as they wanted me to believe. The house had been silent for months, no footsteps upstairs, no slammed doors, no lights on in every room. Only the soft hum of loneliness, the kind that puts down roots. I filled my days slowly, reorganizing closets, reading old novels, even painting the kitchen cabinets a light blue that I chose just for me. One night, the phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but I knew whose voice it was as soon as she spoke. Mom. Jimena's voice was thinner than I remembered, with worn edges. We're struggling. The children miss you. I shouldn't have said those things before. I leaned on the counter, my hands dry from gardening, and rubbed my thumb against my palm to keep me anchored. We just need a little time, she continued. Just until we get up again, please. I closed my eyes. I could imagine her, Ismail, the children scattered in the living room, their voices echoing in my world, shrinking it again piece by piece. And I still miss them. God help me, I miss them. But I didn't have enough to go back. I'm sorry, Jimena, I said, but I can't go back to how it was before. Silence. Then she hung up. I held the phone to my ear a few more seconds, listening to the buzzing where her voice had been. That night, I found myself looking at the door of the guest room, the one they used to call their own. It stayed closed, as it needed to be. I found the sketchbooks in a box marked as old clothes, buried at the back of the hall closet. Most of the pages were blank. Some had half-drawn flowers and faces I forgot I knew how to draw. My hands trembled as I traced the faltering, faded lines, but they were still mine. At the San Miguel Community Center, I signed up for an art class for beginners. I hardly went. The first day, I stayed 15 minutes in the car before entering. But when I walked in and smelled the scent of pencils and linseed oil, something in me broke loose. I came back every week. I drew quiet things, tea leaves, hands at rest. The instructor, Clara, encouraged me with softness, without asking why someone my age was starting over. One day, she leaned over my shoulder and said, "Your lines know where they're going, even when you don't." At home, I planted lavender and rosemary in the empty flower beds in front. My knees hurt, but the earth was warm and understanding. I saw the bees hovering around the flowers, and I felt a calm I didn't know I had lost. The house changed space. I took down the paintings Jimena ordered online and replaced them with my own small drawings at first, then bigger, bolder. I bought new curtains. I moved my armchair to the sunniest corner and had tea in the afternoons without anyone interrupting me. One night, I really laughed, at something I read in the newspaper. The sound surprised me. I hadn't heard it in so long that it felt strange. But it was mine, and it was real. And when I stood at the window that night, watching the rosemary sway with the breeze, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt at home. The spring art exhibition was held in the multipurpose community center hall, where folding tables had linen skirts and paintings rested on wire supports. I arrived early with my small portfolio under my arm, hands shaking slightly, unsure if what I had done belonged on any wall other than my own. Clara greeted me with a smile. "You came," she said, helping me hang my favorite drawings, lavender stems, aged hands, the face of a child turned toward the sun. When people began arriving, I stayed in the middle back, hoping to go unnoticed, but they stopped. They paused, they asked. A woman tilted her head in front of a drawing of a kitchen window and said, "There's something about this that feels like breathing." I didn't say much, just nodded and said thanks, tucking the silence in my chest as something valuable. That week, someone knocked on the door. Two neighborhood girls stood on the porch with a basket of bread rolls between them. "Hello, Mrs. Amalia," one said cheerfully. "Our mom says your garden inspires her." I knelt to their height and smiled. "Tell her I appreciate it." They ran down the sidewalk, their laughter light and carefree. That night, I sat in my armchair next to the window, with the last light of the day resting on the rosemary outside. I opened my notebook and wrote, "I thought disappearing was a loss, but I have never been seen before." I had been so invested in the lives of others, measuring my worth by what I gave, by how silent I could be, by the little space I could occupy. But now, here, in this home that I had recovered centimeter by centimeter, I realized something simple and surprising. I was never meant to disappear. I was destined to take root.